I guess the hero in this journey is going to be Luca,
Yep.
the last universal common ancestor. Let me try my simplification, and then you can do the same as you did earlier, which is elaborate and correct. So life, as we discussed, replicates. It creates copies of itself. In the beginning, we don't really know how they did it, but the codes had to be written somewhere. And the first codes were probably quite weak in a sense that they were easy to break apart. But at some point, a kind of ingenious system is created where you can have a very stable structure where these instructions for the copying and maintenance of life were written. This is, of course, the double helix structure of DNA, like a twisted ladder. And very soon after this invention had been done, there was one creature alive who used this in the same way as all cells nowadays do. This is the famous Luca from Last Universal Common Ancestor. And yeah, so maybe, I don't know if Luca deserves the greatest inventor of all time prize, or if there were many DNA-based cells going around and it happened to be that Luca survived, so that would be the greatest ever survivor story, I guess. But yeah, then we already have cells living with replicating and maintaining themselves using the same language, same code as we use still today.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. And I think Luca, there's certainly the genetic code that Luca used is the great survivor. That's absolutely right. Luca no longer exists, but the code that it uses did. Yeah. And there probably were alternative codes out there, and evolution weeded them out, and Luca had the magic, right?
Yeah. Well, do you think they were different? I mean, I'm very convinced that there were other genetic codes, but do you think there were other, DNA, double helix structured DNAs that were just a tiny bit different? Or could it have been that it was really the creation, that basically the invention of DNA as we think about it and Luca were basically the same event?
It's a good question, and we don't know the answer to that. And I think it's probably going to be very difficult to find evidence that allows us to answer that. My suspicion is that once DNA formed, there would have been different. DNA is a remarkable molecule because it's very stable, as you pointed out. It doesn't react with anything, yet it contains self-assembly manuals for organisms, how to build a body, how to build a cell, how to build you, how to build me. That's what DNA does. But there could be many different codes, and there could have been different amino acids that we use. So my suspicion is that once DNA had evolved, there probably were a set of different codes, but the one that life settled on was the one that outcompeted the others. And we don't know why. We don't know what the advantage would be, but yeah.
And I guess whether Luca was the only one using DNA or as you hinted, probably not the only one. Luca is the only one who did manage to trick death until this day by replicating and its descendants replicating. What DNA allowed, I guess, would it be as simple as saying that what DNA compared to whatever weaker RNA or something else that probably were used before, what it allowed was just more complicated codes, more complicated and more stable mechanisms, allowing therefore more complicated, I guess, creatures to evolve? Or is that too much of a simplification of what DNA is?
The stability of DNA, I think, is important, and the fact that it can form very long chains is also absolutely important. The fact that it's not copied perfectly and mutations occurred is important and is crucial for life. And obviously, it's not just DNA, it's the structure of how the DNA code is turned into proteins, and proteins are the workhorses of life. And that's quite complicated chemistry that involves various steps along the way. It's done more simply in bacteria than it is in eukaryotes. So we're all eukaryotes, so animals and plants. But once that had evolved, I think then DNA, life was able to explore all sorts of ways of working, producing all sorts of proteins. Many were dead ends, but every now and again there's a beneficial mutation where a more efficient protein or a new protein is formed. Life finds a way of doing it. And I mean, life has had 3.9 billion years to sort of dream up the life forms that we see on Earth today. And I think one of the things that we often really struggle with is actually understanding quite what a vast tract of time that is. 3 billion, it's nearly impossible for us to envisage 3.9 billion years. It's hard enough to envisage, anything more than about 100 years, to be honest, which
Yes.
is a long
Yes.
lifespan. So even when we're going back to the evolution of primates and the evolution of first great apes and what have you, when we're still talking tens of millions of years, it's still a vast time track. And I think that's one of the things that's hard for us to understand and hard for us to get our head around, is quite how long life has had. And for most of that time, a lot of that time, it was still pretty simple. It was still single cells. It's only about 2 billion years ago, perhaps, where the first eukaryote, the complex cells, arrived and the first multicellular organisms started to come into existence. So it's had an awfully long time to explore sort of phenotypic space, as it were.
Yeah. Well, and I guess there